from this website. It's from the Friends of Israel Initiative.org website. And this article right here, it says Sephardic Jews in the Caribbean islands. All right, Sephardic Jews. Sephardic Jews helped build nations and islands that were discovered by Christopher Columbus and other people with Jewish background. All right, Columbus, what? With Jewish background. Again, Columbus was a Sephardic Jew, a Moorish Jew. And down here it says, one way or another, there is something nobody can deny about this sea, talking about the Caribbean Sea, of heavenly beauty and its cluster of unmatched islands. Western civilization entered the Western Hemisphere for the first time through the islands of the Caribbean, and Sephardic Jews were among the first Europeans to set foot on the soil of the Western Hemisphere, the New World discovered by Christopher Columbus. I am among those that consider Columbus a Sephardi, that is, a Sephardic Jew. All right, he considers all these references, all these correlation. Yeah, he was a most likely Sephardic Jew. This is another source, another reference. Simon Wiesenthal postulates that Columbus was careful to conceal his Judaism. Others have argued that Columbus was a converso, a Sephardic Jew who publicly converted to Christianity. Another word commonly used as Marrano, a Jew living in the Iberian Peninsula who converted or was forced to convert to Christianity, many of whom continued to practice Judaism in secret. In the Caribbean, Sephardic Jews were sometimes known as Portugals. All right, they was known as Portugals. We got that in Jamaica, right? Or Portuguese, because they originated there or settled in that country after the expulsion of 1492. So remember, these were Moorish people being expelled from Iberia, Spain, and Portugal. My favorite Spanish historian, Don Salvador de Madariaga, one of the 20th century most prominent Spanish statesmen and former professor of Oxford University, describes Columbus' Jewish roots in what I consider an almost definitive biography, Vida del muy magnífico señor Don Cristóbal Colón. The presence of a good number of conversos in Columbus' ship is described by José Amador de los Ríos en his Historia Social, Política y Religiosa de los Judíos de España y Portugal. All right, so we already know, got the background. A lot of these Sephardic Jews and Moors in Columbus ship, we already got that drop before. That is also the opinion of Simon Wiesenthal in his book, Sails of Hope, The Secret Mission of Christopher Columbus. Let me quote, by midnight, August 2nd, 1492, all Jews must leave Spanish soil. That same night, the 3 sailing ships which are to carry Christopher Columbus on his voyage of discovery are anchored quietly in Palos Harbor. And although they are not scheduled to embark until the following day, Columbus has ordered his crew to be on board by 11, but strangely enough, not a single priest is included. The auspicious coincidence of these two events, compounded with the intense mystery which was always surrounded the identity of Columbus, has led to a complete re-examination of all previously accepted theories about the true nature of his mission. The true nature of Columbus' mission. What was the true nature? Remember, he wrote a book saying he was coming to reconquer the holy city and Mount Zion. All right, remember, he's a Sephardic Jew. This is a prophesied this to him. This is a prophetic mission he's on. All right, he's a Sephardi Moor. He's Moorish, a person of color. Going back to 1492 and their massive expulsion, observant Jews fled east to the Ottoman Empire. Others converted in order to remain, and we know a lot of them ended up in other parts of Europe too, not just the Ottoman Empire, right? A minority fled to Portugal. In 1497, Spain pressured Portugal to install its own Inquisition as a prize for the union of the royal houses in marriage. But a new chapter was going to start in Jewish history. New Christians, as conversos and their children were known at that time, made it possible for a new world to be discovered. All right, these are the people who discovered, these are the people who made it possible, all right, the Sephardic Moorish people. Luis de Santangel, Abraham Sr., Gabriel Sanchez, Abraham Sacuto, all right, these people were the ones who funded the voyages, not Queen Elizabeth or Ferdinand, or Isabella, I mean. Abraham Sacuto, the Crescas family, and others contributed with their influence, their money, or their knowledge to Columbus' voyages. It is not possible to know exactly how many Sephardic Jews came to America with Columbus. All right, it's not possible, so they can't say very little. It was mostly, it could be all of them could have been Sephardic Moors, all these Spaniards and Portuguese. They can't tell. Some names are known, among them Luis de Torres, Columbus' interpreter. Remember, Luis de Torres spoke Hebrew. All right, he was his interpreter. Why did they bring in a Hebrew Chaldean interpreter with them to speak with the Indians? All right, so he was his interpreter, and future tobacco planter, one of the first Europeans to walk upon the soil to the New World, as the Harry Array mentions. His book 500 Years in the Jewish Caribbean, together with the names of Maestre Bernal and Marco, the doctor of Flotilla, beginning with these Jews that defied the dangers of the sea. And I consider the great Columbus to be one of them, and many others. Jews were among the first European colonists in the Caribbean. It is true that they had to hide their Jewishness, all right, crypto Jews, secret Jews, and that some had already become Christians under pressure. It is also true that new names were assumed and used when traveling or in business dealings, all right? They were anglicizing their names or changing them around, all right? As Ratti mentions details like the following: Moses Cohen might become Antonio Valles Enriquez or Joshua Toledo. Toledo was a common Jewish name. Might become Juan de la Madrid. All right, so they might change their name completely from Joshua Toledo to Juan de la Madrid. The legendary Amsterdam Jewish shipowner Manuel Rodriguez was elsewhere known as Jacob Tirado or Tirado. He may also have assumed the names Gimes Lopez da Costa or Simon Lopez da Costa. All right, see how they were switching their names. All right, Sephardic Jews, Moors, Moorish people, people of color, that we thought a lot of these people were so-called white Europeans, but they weren't. They weren't. It would take a long time to look at all the names and all the possibilities beginning with 1492, but there is no important event in the period and future periods in which Jews were not present at a very important part of the history of the Caribbean. They were there, all right? The first sailors, soldiers, officers, planners, builders, teachers, even priests and friars included an extremely high number of Jews, all right? Some of which practiced their faith in secret. In other words, when we talk about the discovery, conquest, and colonization of the New World, and not only of the Caribbean, we are dealing with a chapter of Jewish history. Of course, Spanish authorities realigned the high number of new Christians in the New World or trying to reach it. Secret Jews were discovered and tried in Hispaniola, today's Dominican Republic, and Haiti, in Cuba, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, and Trinidad, among other places. So they were all over the place. They were the settlers, early pioneers of these places. As we talk about islands and historical events, we are going to enter into a fascinating subject that needs more exploration, all right? And it's true, now think about what they're telling us. Think about what we're learning. When we're talking about these first settlers and pioneers, we know they're Spanish and Portuguese, right? So, they told us on history when we was always picturing these first conquistadors, right? Like these ruthless people coming and invading and taking the land and conquering, conquistadors, right? But it was actually Sephardic Jews and Moors, all right? Sephardic Jews and Moors who were the actual people doing that they told us. As we talk about islands, again, fortunately, recent historians and researchers are now aware of the Jewishness of some of the chapters of Caribbean and American history. As we are not able to discuss all the details, let us concentrate on some of them. We're not dealing with Jewish presence in Mexico, Central, and South America, all right? So that's a whole other video we're going to do. Remember, I keep telling you that. We're going to get into that, right? Who are these people there and what was going on over there in these places as well. It would take a very long talk to deal with the information that is becoming available about those areas of the Western Hemisphere. Again, he just said that is becoming available. As we research, and even today, this video, this is all new stuff, right? That this is coming available for everybody. We're putting it all together. It's all correlating. An interesting book I recommend is Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean, right? That's the book we just read, prologue and introduction. His book is introduced and is covered with these words: how a generation of swashbuckling Jews carved out an empire in the New World in their quest for treasure, religious freedom, and revenge. There were Catholic, Calvinist, Lutheran, Anglican, and Jews pirates, and many others without any interest in religious matters, all right? You see that? All these Calvinists, Huguenots, Protestants, right? All these tags, these are the same people. There were Catholic, Calvinist, Lutheran, Anglican, and Jews pirates, and many others without any interest in religious matters. Piracy is not exactly what we see in movies, all right? Piracy is not what we see in movies, all right? Johnny Depp, all that. Jack Sparrow, that's not the real. That's not the real. In some parts of the world, there was a regular occupation practiced or tolerated by governments and influential individuals. I continue in the same article from Friends of Israel Initiative.org. It says here, the Dutch and religious toleration in the Caribbean. We already know the role of the Dutch, the Protestant place, also Sephardic capital, right? The New Jerusalem. So the Dutch, who are these Dutch? All right, we got to take that tag off. There's people behind that, and there's Sephardic Jews and Moors behind that. The Netherlands first. Then England granted religious toleration to people that identified publicly as Jews. Many Jews from Portugal with ancestors in Spain settled in the Netherlands and other Protestant countries, right? Protestant places. Despite some unpleasant incidents, Jewish life became part of Dutch society, and Dutch Jews became financially active in the Dutch East India Company, right? They were in charge of what? The Dutch East India and Dutch West India Company. We already got that in past videos. As former Spanish colonies became Dutch more and more, Jews became active participants in business and other activities. When Recife and Bahia, cities controlled by the Dutch for a period of time in the 16th and 17th centuries, were conquered by the Portuguese, a number of Jews moved to some of the small islands of the Caribbean. They were not the only Jewish settlers of the region, but in Suriname, in South America, and in Curaçao, St. Eustatius, St. Martin, and Aruba in the Caribbean, small but prosperous Jewish communities developed. Suriname is not geographically part of the Caribbean, but it is culturally Caribbean to an extent. Many authors consider Suriname the oldest continuous Jewish community in the region. In Suriname, it was the first country in the Western Hemisphere where Jews settled openly. Crypto Jews came in 1536. In 1639, observant Jews founded a colony with the name of Torah Rica, or Torah Rica, rich Torah. Suriname was for a while a British and then a Dutch colony. All right. Despite minor differences in chronology, it made you useful to remember that Oliver Cromwell, the Lord Protector, opened England to Jews in the middle of the 17th century, and that Jews were openly practicing their faith in the Netherlands more or less at the same time. Countries ruled by Calvinists were more open to the open practice of Judaism than Catholic and Lutheran nations. Curaçao had a large Jewish community. By Caribbean standards, even though Cuba was going to have the largest Jewish community in the 20th century before the Castro Revolution, but until the 20th century, Curaçao had the largest Jewish community in the region. Jews fleeing from Recife, Brazil, arrived in 1659 under the leadership of Isaac da Costa. Right? We got Isaac da Costa already in the video. We got the da Costas and how they were being labeled in the North America. They were being labeled mulattoes. They were Irish mulattoes because they were Sephardic Jews. They were people of color. All right, so the coast of very strong history. We got a lot of this history before, again, in past videos, but we'll go over it again. It says Mikveh Israel Emmanuel is the oldest synagogue in continuous use in the Western Hemisphere. Besides the Sephardic community, there is a significant Ashkenazic community. For more than 3 centuries and a half, Jewish worship has been conducted there. An interesting fact is that Curaçao Sephardic Jews supported Simón Bolívar efforts during the South American Wars for independence, all right? Sephardic. And Bolívar is believed to be a person of color as well. The families Lobo and Maduro, originally from Curaçao, are among the best known in Caribbean history. The relation between the Sephardic communities, all right? So Maduro, the president that they have recently or whatever, that's a Sephardic family. Now you see why he was president, right? Or whatever, dictator, whatever you want to see him as. The relationship between the Sephardic communities of the Caribbean and South America and the early Jewish communities in the 13 colonies is significant and historical. It's very significant and historical. That's why we're researching this, getting to know this information. Among other facts, I would like to point out that in the September 1654, 23 Jews from Sephardic community in the Netherlands, coming from Recife, Brazil, arrived in New Amsterdam, New York City. All right. This is where they end up. This is why this is important. They did not find a friend in Dutch Governor Peter Stuyvesant, but religious pluralism was already in tradition in the Netherlands, and the Dutch West India Company overruled his discriminating practices against other religions. The Dutch West India, why did the Dutch West India make them do that? Because that was owned by Sephardic Jews as well, people of color. All right, continue a little bit more. It says, and the British came. Not only Jews from Dutch colonies, but also from British colonies are related to the history of Sephardic Jews in the Caribbean. For instance, there was a very active community in the island of Nevis. There was a synagogue on Nevis in 1684, and remains of the synagogues and Jewish cemeteries is almost all the islands serve as testimony of Jewish contributions to society. By the way, Alexander Hamilton, all right, we got this already. We got this. I did the video already. Check it out. Go back if you haven't checked that out. First Secretary of the Treasury of the United States, received his elementary education in a small Jewish school in his native Nevis. We know that Alexander Hamilton, a colored person, he was being called Swarty, a Swarty Caribbean, mulatto, very dark skinned. He was called, and we know that his mom was a Huguenot. That he has Sephardic and Huguenot in him. All right, so we know very suspect for being a dark complexion. Many important names of teachers, politicians, merchants, and professional people indicate the extent of Jewish influence in the small islands of the Caribbean. American statesman Judah Philip Benjamin, one of America's greatest lawyers, was born in St. Croix. He served as senator from Louisiana and then as member of the Confederate cabinet. All right. Who was he? A Sephardic Jew. He was the famous Secretary of State of the Confederate States of America. Who? A Sephardic Jew, Moorish Jew. The Virgin Islands had 3 Jewish governors. The island of St. Thomas had a long Jewish history. Sephardic Jews brought their knowledge of sugar culture. All right, their knowledge of sugar. There was the sugar plantations. Who established the sugar plantations? Who were they really enslaving? Who was really the masters? David de Mercado made Barbados become a leading producer of sugar and rum. David Mercado, Sephardi Jew, Moorish Jew. Early Sephardic residents of Barbados came from the Recife diaspora. All right, so they ended up in Barbados from Brazil. Eventually, from Barbados, they would also end up in the United States, up like areas like South Carolina. All right, a synagogue was built in Bridgetown, Barbados in 1833, but many Sephardim immigrated to England, the United States, or other islands because of 2 factors: hurricanes and the decline of sugar in the world market. All right, it says, and now the Spanish Caribbean. I shall start with Hispaniola, our beloved Dominican Republic, and Haiti, but there is something about the brief Spanish occupation of Jamaica that has always interested me. There is no hard evidence for Columbus' alleged gold mine in Jamaica. There are so many legends in the Caribbean and in the rest of the world, but there is enough evidence that in his 4th voyage, when he had been forced to beach his ships in Jamaica after sailing from Panama, with a cache of gold objects bartered from the Indians, Columbus had to face a rebellion, and his brother Bartholomew was able to defeat it with a group of 50 youngsters, many of whom were probably Sephardic Jews. All right, now you get a clear history here. Some of these Jews decided to stay in Jamaica, even when Columbus was able to return to Hispaniola. When his eldest son Diego came to Hispaniola to replace Ovando as governor, he recruited Portuguese from Hispaniola to explore Jamaica and settle there. Diego appointed Juan de Esquivel, a converse who served under Bartholomew. Esquivel was eventually appointed governor of Jamaica and directed converts to settle in Jamaica. All right, again, this is a Sephardic Moorish Jew. A Caribbean island that for a while served as a haven for Jews. Jamaica, again, was a haven for Sephardic Moorish Jews. Chrysler points out that under the protection of the island's rulers, covert Jews came disguised as conversos from Portugal. Remember, these were pirates. A lot of these were pirates. Port Royal, remember, their presence there known and approved by the Spanish crown. That is not the end of the story. When British warships sailed into Jamaican waters towards Kingston Harbor, after having failed to conquer Santo Domingo, they were led by Campo Sabata, a Marrano Jewish pilot. The British were welcomed by the descendants of early Sephardic settlers. All right, they were welcomed by who? Again, we got the story ready. This is how Jamaica became to be a part of England, a territory of England from Spain. It was because of the Sephardic Moorish people that were there helping them. Not even the Inquisition was able to reach them. Now, by 1735, there were about 800 Jews in Jamaica. Jews have been among the most important personalities in Jamaican history, members of Jamaica's Privy Council, or Privy Council Major of Kingston and other cities. All right, they were prominent roles. All right, and a lot of these people were probably calling them these are the half Jew or half African, and they try to add the whole slavery thing because they were persons of color, but no, it's because they were actually Sephardic and Moorish people from Iberia. A prominent Jew was the first Jamaican ambassador to the United States, and the oldest and most important newspaper, the Daily Gleaner, was founded by the brothers Phineas and Jacob de Cordoba, all right, by Sephardic Moors in Jamaica, all right. So the first prominent ambassador to the United States from Jamaica was a Jew, all right, getting this information. Some of the members of the Jewish community are not Sephardic, as a good number of Polish Jews moved to the island during the Second World War, all right. This is recent. You heard that? All right, this is recent. This is not colonial times. We're not talking about the same thing. It says the early Sephardic Jews that came to Santo Domingo were Maese Bernal, Luis de Torres, Rodrigo Triana, Juan Verde de Triana, Rodrigo Sanchez, Juan del Barco, Gabriel Barahona, and others. But Sephardic Jews lived in different locations on the island, not only in Santo Domingo. Some lived in what is now Haiti. This situation was not limited to the period of Spanish colonization. Through the 18th century, names as De Paz, Sarceda, Soria, Grades, Monsanto, GMO, were found in French Haiti. The slave revolt of the 1790s affected Jews and other whites that died or had to flee. Many Sephardic Jews moved to South Carolina. Again, many Sephardic Jews moved to South Carolina and other areas. And here we go with the whole background and connection, right? You guys saw my South Carolina video. You guys know that South Carolina was especially Charleston, was a free person of color town, mainly, only, possibly, most likely, right? Until for a very long time. So many Sephardic Jews, many of those people were Sephardic Jews, Moorish Sephardic Jews that were there. Charleston received, again, here we go, I haven't read this. Charleston received Sephardic Jews from the many Caribbean locations. Even before that, some Jewish merchants remained in Haiti after independence, and later on some Jews from Europe moved to Haiti. Very few live there today. When mentioning Haiti, we should take into consideration that French Jews visited those colonies under French control. Again, French Jews, those are the same people. All right, remember a lot of the Iberians, Sephardic Moors, had to go to France when they got expelled from Spain and Portugal. So these French Jews has visited these colonies under French control, and some stayed there. Guadeloupe, Haiti, and Martinique. All right, same people. They're just being called French, just like these are being called Spanish, Portugals, or Dutch. The family of Prime Minister Pierre Mendès France lived in Jérémie, Haiti, until they moved to Bordeaux. The Mendes are well-known Sephardic family. All right, these are Sephardic Jews. All right, we move on. It says here, Puerto Rico is the second island to be colonized by the Spanish because of the Castro Revolution and the exile of thousands of Cuban Jews. Puerto Rico has the largest Jewish population in the Caribbean. Puerto Rico, and what is your ancestry there? Really? Do you guys know who you really are there? Not just Taino, but also some of the Sephardic and Moorish blood in you. 3,000 or more, and is the only island in the region in which Orthodox, conservatives, and Reformed Jewish movements are represented. Some of the early Europeans inhabiting the island were Sephardic Jews, but little is known about their presence. Nevertheless, some names are known: Salomon Señor, Elias de Sola, Isaac de Lima, Judah Cohen, among others. Most of them were merchants, but Isaac de Lima was a well-known doctor of Mayagüez. Unlike other islands, there are no significant records of synagogues, cemeteries, or settlements. Roman Catholicism was enforced rigorously. That's why. A well-documented book about Cuban Jews is Tropical Diaspora, written by Robert Levine, but there are other sources. Many Sephardic Jews lived in Cuba during the Spanish domination, but it was not until 1898 when formal Jewish communities were organized. I would like to emphasize that the first bishop of Cuba that was born in the Caribbean, Don Pedro Agustin Morel de Santa Cruz, born in Santiago de los Caballeros in the 18th century, was not only Sephardic, but he probably was a crypto Jew, almost the same thing. He was the first Cuban historian and the most prominent personality during the period, 1761-62, that Havana and Western Cuba were under British domination. He challenged British demands to such an extent that he was deported and sent to Florida. Bishop Morel wrote extensively about his history and pastoral work. Cuban historian Cesar Garcia de Pino wrote a book explaining his belief that Bishop Morel was a crypto Jew that survived the continuous accusations of the Inquisition. He was lying about his identity to survive. Early Jewish Cubans were Sephardic, and their last names are no different from those of their Dominican neighbors. Practically every name I included in my Dominican list are to be found in Cuba. Dr. Levine writes about the beginnings of Sephardic Jewish presence. Historical accounts of the Jewish colony. Evolution on the islands emphasize Jewish connections with Cuba by considering as Jews many people who may or may not have considered themselves members of the Jewish faith. This includes individuals whose ancestors had converted to Catholicism and who were brought up as Catholic, and also others suspected of having been Marranos. All right, so we got a lot of this information. We keep getting this like it's the first time. It gets more solid in our head. You know, we know the background. We started getting more clear picture of this, right? Of these people, of the whole history, a more clear history. All right, so they haven't been Marranos or New Christians, those who maintain outward signs of Christianity. Levine and other authors coincide in believing that the Holy Inquisition was established in Havana around 1519, and that many conversos were accused of being secret Jews. Although aside from one 16th century case, Escalante did not issue sentences until 1610. One name is Francisco Lopez de Leon, convicted of Judaizing and executed. A famous victim of the Inquisition was a Marrano sailor, Captain Miranda, who brought with him a Hebrew Bible from Curaçao. Most of the Sephardic Jews who came to Cuba in the early 20th century were descendants of the late 15th century Jewish exiles from the Iberian Peninsula, all right? Moorish people right here, right? Most of the Sephardic Jews who came in Cuba, what? Descendants of the same people who got expelled with the Moors and the Sephardic Jews from Portugal, Spain. On the other hand, Cuba received more immigrants from Turkey than did any other part of Latin America, and there's a lot of Turkish blood in there. And we know Sephardic people also carry Turkish blood too. A lot of them do. So a lot of Turkish people, more than any other part of the Latin America, and most of these were Jews. Again, most of these Turkish people were what? Jews, Sephardic Jews, these Turkish people. All right, so that was Friends of Israel Initiative.org letting us know the drop of the Sephardic Jews in the Caribbean islands.